Hello everybody. So it's a beautiful day here in Wisconsin. So I'm outside soaking in some sun before I do some garden work. I'm trying to find a good angle here. So I'm not squinting into the sun and you can actually see my face, but it doesn't look like it's going to work. You can see my kids back there playing in the dirt. But so I wanted to make this video quick because it's come to my attention that there's quite a bit of misunderstanding when it comes to certain ways of eating, from like fruitarian to frugivore to vegan, raw vegan, all those things. People are kind of confused of the difference, which makes sense. There's a lot of different labels that are out there, so there's confusion between all of it. But the main thing I wanted to say is how the difference between fruitarian and frugivore. So I've spoken before on other videos about how we are, I'm not going to say definitively because we don't know definitively, that we are very likely frugivores, or at least we're descendant or related to frugivores, as in we're related to primates, whether that be evolution or intelligent design. As I've mentioned before, I've come upon a lot that has talked about the intentional splicing of chromosomes between primates and some other species in order to create humans, which means we're likely part primate and part something else, whether it be something off this planet or whatever it is. So that brings me to the concept of being a frugivore, which is what I eat in that manner now. I call myself a frugivore just because I think that's what we are in its most simple way, rather than all the other labels. But frugivore is technically an offset of omnivore. So when people say we're omnivores, yes, we are omnivores because we can receive nutrients from plant and animal sources. That's what an omnivore is. But an omnivore isn't defined as something that has to eat meat and plants. So it basically means that we receive beneficial nutrients from both. And we've evolved to become that. I think most omnivores have evolved in order to survive, which is why we became an omnivore, that we can use plants, fruits, nuts, seeds, and meat in order to survive. But then it brings you to the present, where we are no longer in a state of survival, at least in our modern society of the United States. That's what I'm going to use as a reference. We are not in a state of survival, which then means that we don't need meat. But being a frugivore is a species that just prefers, it's not even just a species, any creature that prefers fruit as a primary food source. So when you see someone who's a frugivore, or even an animal for that matter, there are birds and primates, of course, and other animals that are frugivores, they get the majority of their nutrients from fruits and some vegetables. But fruits include some things that people identify as vegetables, like tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, I think squash, anything with a seed. So anything with a seed is a fruit, botanically. So that's what it's based off of. and then some nuts and seeds. But an aspect that a lot of people miss is the fact that Frugivore is not vegan. So you can be a vegan and be a frugivore. However, being a frugivore does not equal vegan. Like, primates are not vegan in that they sometimes eat insects and bugs of sorts, and sometimes even small animals if it's a threat. However, their primary food source is still fruits, nuts, and seeds. So then we talk about fruitarian. Fruitarian is a subset of veganism, meaning it's basically a form of raw vegan, which is they pretty much eat only fruits, maybe some greens, the occasional nuts and seeds possibly, but otherwise no other animal products. So that would be the main difference between fruitarian and frugivore, which I think a lot of people are thinking that frugivore and fruitarian are the same thing, but they're not. Frugivore is similar to omnivore in that it's a category of identification of how a creature eats. But fruitarian is like a subset of that further. It's a subset of being a vegan. So fruitarians are vegan. However, you can be vegan and be a frugivore, but being a frugivore doesn't mean you are vegan necessarily. I know, confusing. And I don't always particularly enjoy all of the labels, because I think the labels is where we tend to get caught up in the restrictiveness and just the restrictiveness of that diet, and you kind of lose yourself in that, where it becomes so much of you that you kind of forget why you're doing what you're doing and why we are here. You know, what is the point of being here on Earth? So I often say I'm fruit-based vegan. However, even that I wouldn't say is it's not perfect. I'm not a perfect vegan. I don't claim to be. I'm not eating meat. That's not what I mean by that. I mean, there are certain little things that have dairy in it. Like certain baked goods, if I go out somewhere, I'll have, whether it be a muffin. It's pretty minimal. But where I live, it can be sometimes pretty difficult to always find 100% food. So usually when I go out to eat is the time that I'm not absolutely 100% restrictive, and it has to be vegan or I won't eat it. Like I said, I'm not eating meat. So I'm vegetarian for sure. I guess that's how I would say it. Fruit-based, definitely vegetarian, and mostly vegan. But and I think that's probably that dogmatism is where we tend to not have good conversations about these topics. We get stuck in the labels of everything and so restrictive in everything that we lose sight of understanding others and wanting to understand where other people are coming from. So that's where our discussions on these topics need to go. Not so much of we all need to be vegan or it's the end of the world, or we're all meat eaters, we all need to eat meat. It needs to be more of an open conversation about what is best for our bodies, for our health and wellness, and what is best for our planet moving forward. So I'm going to leave it at that and make more later. Now it's time for me to go do some gardening, but I will talk to you guys later. Happy Saturday.